welcome to episode 5 of the Mac Gamecast, a podcast where we talk all about Mac gaming and related tech, culture, history, etc. things. I'm John Carr. With me here is Casper. How you doing, Casper?
Howdy. Back again.
Fantastic. Sam's back from vacation. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, doing very well.
Fantastic. And the star of the show today is Andy, all the way, I believe, from the UK, right? How are you doing, Andy?
That's right. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Yes. Thank you for coming on the show. So, brief overview. Today we're just going to be talking about, starting off anyway, talking about with some various things about the M1 Apple Silicon, which Andy specializes in tinkering with. And he also runs some gaming wikis. We're going to talk about that and see where the discussion goes. So, Andy, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself a little bit in terms of what your passions or specialties are.
Oh, okay, great. So my name's Andrew Tsai. I'm also known as Andy Tizer. I run several things. So I think the thing I'm most famous for is actually a website called PC Gaming Wiki, which is a kind of technical support website where people contribute their own fixes to various PC games. But in the last year or so, I've been much more interested in kind of the M1 gaming on Mac computers. And so I've started a YouTube channel, which is all about tinkering and running games to their best ability and all. And I've also started a new wiki, a sister wiki to PC Gaming Wiki called Apple Gaming Wiki. And this is all about the compatibility and guides to running games as well as possible, especially for the M1 Apple Silicon Macs.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's kind of my gaming career so far.
Nice. So PC Gaming Wiki makes sense. That stuff's always useful. And there's always weird problems going on with PC games that need fixing, in my experience, from boot camping. So how did you get from the PC gaming space, which tends to be more like if you're on that side, you're kind of on that side. So how did you get from there to doing like Apple Silicon stuff?
So in my kind of professional life, I've worked a lot with Mac computers. So I guess I've been doing a lot of freelance repair work and IT support. So what I found is that in my kind of professional life for the last like 7 or 8 years, I've been working almost exclusively with Apple Mac users, right? So that's the kind of niche that I fell into. So basically helping people sort out their data and use Mac computers, Apple computers. And what I found is that the resources for Mac gaming is in a much worse state than PC gaming ever was. So when I created PC Gaming Wiki in 2012, it was very difficult to find things like save game locations and compatibility and little fixes. You'd have to hunt around forums for hours trying to find the fix and the information that you needed. And what I found is that when it comes to the Apple side, there are lots of very capable Apple computers, which people don't really know whether a game is going to function on it. The user base is much smaller. And what I found is that when the M1 Apple Silicon Macs came out, we finally had a base level Mac, which didn't have like the Intel integrated graphics. We had something that was actually quite powerful, something that could rival the discrete graphics of the previous MacBook generations, and but we didn't have an actual resource to actually find out what games would actually work, and nothing that would work, nothing that could be user updatable. So what I decided to do was to start creating videos, tutorials, and then I created a website as well. And it's all in the idea is to help people as much as possible find the information they need as quickly and as easily, and take advantage of the relatively fast hardware that we've got now. So if you have an Apple Silicon Mac, you've got something that can play games relatively quickly, relatively well, and much better than the previous generations of Macs.
Cool. Yeah. We've had a little talk about the M1 on and off on the show, mostly episode 1, but it still remains fascinating to me, browsing forums or Mac Gaming subreddit. People keep posting stuff like, oh, this is running on my M1 and that's running on my M1. Usually it's a non-native game. Like someone had a post, I think, about Titanfall 2 recently. someone's always trying to run GTA 5 or whatever as well on it. I don't know if they've succeeded yet. But in terms of both native or non-native performance, the bottom line is the machines do way more than I ever expected them to do, basically for their price point. So the hardware is very cool. From your perspective, seeing as you tinker with this and you've been helping people with it, with your wiki and your videos, do you find yourself continue to be surprised, or do you feel you have a good handle on what the machines can do?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I mean, when the M1s first came out, there were the Rosetta 2, which is the kind of translation layer, which translates the x86 64-bit calls to the ARM silicon. Works tremendously well. Like almost everything just works out of the box. You double click on something, and 90% of the time it will work. But there's a lot of games which just didn't function without some kind of patching at the beginning. So it was quite interesting seeing that people were having issues with games running on that M1 Apple Silicon, even then. And that's just standard Intel macOS gaming. And then we have like non-native gaming as well, and there's so many possibilities because games like you were saying, like GTA 5. I don't know why people keep constantly wanting to play GTA 5 on their MacBooks. Right, it seems to be like an ongoing obsession. It's probably one of the things that people keep asking me like virtually every day. It's like, how do I get GTA working on my Mac? But people also expect kind of Macs to behave a little bit like PCs as well. They expect like because of the boot camp of the past, we had the option of natively booting Windows, and so you had the ability to play GTA 5 quite well on a Mac, right? But people are kind of obsessed with this this idea of playing very popular games on their M1, and people have heard that the M1s are relatively powerful now and that they are capable of gaming. But the reality is that most of the most popular games aren't actually compatible with the M1, and so they're kind of a bit disappointed by that.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned an obsession with GTA 5 in the Apple Gaming Discord, which is created by Mr. Mac Wright. Same thing. There's like 5 people a day in there like, how do I run GTA 5? Or is it available on Mac? And everyone's like, no. It is interesting. But it's understandable, as all being gamers, wanting to play either popular games or exciting games, or just a game you want to play, whether it's a very popular one or not. I appreciate someone... I appreciate anyone who does anything for Mac gaming, but specifically on the side of information, basically. Yeah, like what can my computer run? What can my M1 or my Apple Silicon run? So like wikis and tutorial videos, I think that's very important because, and I've mentioned this possibly every podcast without intentionally planning to, the knowledge level of the average Mac gamer is very low, unfortunately. So, I mean, I have some people I see in the support channel of this Discord being like, I just bought a new Mac and I want to do this thing and it doesn't do this thing. It's like, maybe you should have checked before you bought the Mac whether it could do the thing. You know what I mean? Like, it was very important. Like, I absolutely need this program or this game. It's like, maybe you should do something else.
I find it very interesting, like the disparate levels of technical ability, like you said, because I would say that the average technical ability of the Mac gamer is relatively low. However, there's something about the Mac operating system which gives so much access to tweaks that is on a such greater level than on a PC. Right. There are. It's such an open-ended kind of question, really. Can a game run on it? Can you run Titanfall 2 through Wine on a Mac? Right. That was a question that I thought was impossible, a few months ago. But turns out that with enough tweaking, if you pour enough time into this, you can get virtually any game to run on a Mac. It's just a question of putting together like some high-level fixes and some kind of very interesting tweaks and some engineers on it, really. And And it can actually happen. I mean, virtually every game can be played on a Mac. It's just, can you find someone to dedicate enough time and resource to making it work?
Right.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting seeing these new games pop up, which suddenly start working because somebody's discovered a new fix for it, and it happens very frequently. I thought that the number of games playable on the M1 was quite small, but it turns out it's getting bigger and bigger every day, right? So when Parallel 17 came out a few days ago, when Crossover 21 was released a few days ago, this opened up like a brand new kind of brand new set of games which are suddenly compatible. So that library is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is. Yeah. If Sam or Casper have any questions, feel free to chime in or comments. But
yeah,
no, go ahead.
I'm not
Yeah.
convinced though that the level of technical skill for a Mac gamer is necessarily lower than the technical skill of a Linux or PC gamer. It's just that because of the native support for gaming being somewhat less on Mac OS than it is on Windows, for example, or well, Linux might be a different case, but Linux also has more semi-official support from Proton, Steam's, or rather Valve's well, what would a good word there be? It's not quite emulation.
It's wine, I believe.
Yeah, it is really wine under the hood anyway. But yeah, so wine is not an emulation, whatever. But I think that because you don't have that sort of semi-official support / fully official support, when people want to play a game on Windows, they'll just be like able to click play if it's on an easy platform like Good Old Games, Steam, whatever. And if they can't do that on the Mac, the people who don't necessarily have the skill set to understand that it's not compatible with the operating system will then make forum posts, or, well, perhaps not forum posts, but comment on a Discord or something where that doesn't necessarily happen on the Windows platform, not because the technical skill set is higher on average, but just because there is that official support, so you don't get to that eventuality in the first place.
That's actually really clever. It's true. I have been making that comment or statement from my point of view without considering what you just said. So, like, imagine if PC gamers were in the same situation. It could very well end up with the same result or very similar result, kind of a thing. What do you think, Sam?
I had a question for Andy. Excuse me. With Valve's Proton and Wine and stuff like that, and Valve, I would assume, making very large strides. Like, I know Proton works really well near native or even beyond native performance in many, many games. Has that translated at all to Crossover or Wine on the Mac? Like, I know Proton doesn't run on the Mac, but has Valve's strides made any progress on the Mac side with Wine or Crossover?
So, as far as I'm aware, Proton was originally designed for Mac and Linux operating systems, and then it was quite early on dropped from the Mac operating system. And so there's no official kind of support from Valve for Mac gaming anymore. None of the Valve games are compatible with the 64-bit operating systems, Catalina or later, and which is very disappointing because they had such a good cooperation just a few years ago. And the only relation that I can really see is that Codeweavers, the creators of Crossover, are kind of contracted to work on Proton, right? So there is a link there, and obviously Codeweavers also create Crossover, which is the compatibility layer which makes many Windows games work on a Mac, and so you can see that if the same organization, same business, is working on Proton, and then they're bringing maybe some of that funding and their engineering man hours is being poured into Wine, the open source project, and then maybe that will help with some of the Mac compatibility too. But to be honest, I see it as a very tenuous link. I've seen some pundits say that Mac OS is going to be saved by Valve because Valve in their Steam Deck announcement promised that they would fix the easy anti-cheat issues with the most popular games like PUBG and Apex Legends. The thing which stops them from running on a Mac is the fact that it runs this anti-cheat which detects whether it's running through Proton or Wine or a virtual machine. And they've made that promise. and it'll be up to contractors like code weavers to fix that problem. Whether that is actually going to be transferred over to the Mac operating system, I'm very skeptical about. I don't actually think it will happen. Firstly, I don't think Valve will be able to achieve that goal of convincing the popular multiplayer shooter games to make their anti-cheat compatible with Proton in the first place. I don't think that's going to happen, even though Valve have promised it. And then secondly, even if they do achieve it, I don't think they're going to bother spending the time or porting those fixes to the Mac operating system, because Valve don't have real any kind of interest in fixing things for the Mac operating system, in my opinion. So
yeah, my assumption is that Valve's probably just going to pay essentially to license, like easy anti-cheat or whatever. Valve will just be like, hey, can you whitelist the Steam Deck? Here's $1 million.
I think a few more $1 million. Because if
just the Steam Deck, not Linux overall, just Steam Deck.
Yeah, but if you because Steam Deck is an x86 machine running Linux. If you whitelist Steam Deck, some Linux programmer will figure out how to port that to some kind of cheating hardware or software, and then I'm just so skeptical about the ability. Because there's so many business interests. If a multiplayer game lives or dies by how many cheaters there are in the cheaters ruin everything, right? And if you open up your secret anti-cheat software to these very big markets, right? But the Steam Deck is going to be a tiny drop in the ocean compared to the general Windows PC market, and it just seems like it will be introducing vulnerabilities. So I remain skeptical about it.
Yeah, in addition to what you said, as far as I understand, the anti-cheat isn't even controlled by the developers. It's the publishers who determine if it's in the game or not, or what kind it is, or how much DRM it has, or whatever. At least that's what I've heard or read in the industry. So even if certain developers wanted to do it, I believe it has to be approved by a publisher. And if they somehow feel it threatens the financial side of it or whatever, it's like hard no. You've mentioned so many interests at work, and that's. I remain optimistic, but also skeptical, much like you, for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I mean, Mac gaming, it's in such a weird place right now, and when we've talked about that on the show before, I think it's also in a very interesting place for a variety of reasons. But whether the real future, if we want to talk about the future of Mac gaming for a little bit, or the possibility of whatever that future, the theoretical future of Mac gaming, I feel probably doesn't lie in majority native games. I think it's going to be a much more shared space of native games and non-native games, either the crossover parallels or streaming services and whatever. Unless, we talked about on the show before, Apple could surprise us. Maybe. They've made a few comments, doesn't mean much. We haven't seen, but the hardware is amazing. The theoretical M1X or M2 or whatever later this year or next year could continue to really impress us and surprise us. Maybe will they actually do any, they're, as far as I recall, they're the richest company in the world, or they have the most cash or something. It's like, you see all these other studios like Microsoft and others, they're always buying up game studios all the time. Microsoft bought Bungie famously way back in the day, for example, but it's just in the PC news all the time. This studio, this umbrella company or whatever bought, ZeniMax bought Bethesda and ID and all these things. And I don't know what, the Saber Group just bought Aspire Media, and on it goes. It's like, surely Apple, with its literally the richest company in the world, could, buy a game company or something, do some Mac stuff. They could, but of course it's just not their thing. Yeah. What do you think, Sam?
Well, one thing I'm thinking, at least they have Apple Arcade, and there's a few good games on there, but at least they have it from, it's on Apple's radar. Their gaming is something that they talk about, even though I know it's phone games and they're kind of shovelware for the most part. those run natively, and if they have dumped money on publishers and be like, hey, make this game, it's going to be exclusive for Apple Arcade.
That's true.
And here's X amount number of dollars. So maybe they'll start to do that more, or maybe if Apple Arcade grows, you'll start to have publishers approaching them and be like, hey, we would like to bring this game to Apple Arcade. And if M1 Max plus iPads plus iPhones is like, that's a massive market. That's like hundreds of millions of devices.
That's true.
Maybe that will become attractive enough for like, quote, real games down the road. It's a long shot, but that's my one like sort of silver lining that I'm hoping for in like 5-10 years, not like next month or anything.
I can see that. It's like pulling it into the general orbit, the bigger orbit of not the Mac specific ecosystem, but the Apple ecosystem. And if so people get in that bigger orbit, maybe it'll slowly suck them in to the Mac one specifically.
Because they all run the same chip essentially. Like obviously the power levels are different, but that's why M1 Max can run iPhone apps. So maybe like you have some games like Aspire. They had the KOTOR games and stuff like that on iPhone. Right. I haven't tried that on M1, but I would assume that just runs flawlessly on an M1 Mac. Stuff like that.
I think the only version you can get on Mac OS is the one that's also Intel native anyway. But I don't know.
Did they let you sideload the App Store one? I don't know if they do.
At least earlier versions of Mac OS, you could install any iPhone app package, but you can't do that anymore. So I don't know. But I would think it would be a better experience to run the version of KOTOR that's built for macOS anyway, even if it's through Rosetta. Not from a performance standpoint, but it's an old game anyway, so performance might not matter that much. But in terms of like resolution scaling and that sort of thing.
I have a question because I believe all three of you are more techy than I am, technical than I am. So we have Rosetta 2, which is clearly a big jump over, well, Rosetta 1. I remember using way back in the day. It wasn't that great. So Rosetta 2 is quite impressive, you know. Do you feel like there will be any more work at all put into Rosetta, or like a future somehow Rosetta 3, or is it just kind of like Rosetta 2 and there's just going to be an eventual transition? Like eventually there'll basically be Intel will practically be extinct and it's all just M1 or Silicon whatever version, you know, going on. Or all, I guess the thing is all apps would eventually have a binary available for Silicon or whatever.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the route we're going to go down. That eventually it'll just be native and Rosetta will be taken out of the operating system.
Right.
A Rosetta 3 would have to be if we're going to MIPS or something instead, like another processor architecture. So, I don't know. Yeah. I think Rosetta is going to maybe get minor tweaks here and there, but it's not going to wildly change in terms of performance characteristics or anything. And then it's just going to fade out eventually.
Right. Yeah,
the goal from Apple's perspective is to make developers want to make native apps rather than just make an x86 binary and have Rosetta do the work, right?
True.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is quite a worry that basically, if we look at our native game library currently as it stands, it's tiny, and most of it is Rosetta 2. And the idea that Rosetta 2 is going to be ripped out of the heart of the Apple Silicon Macs is going to drastically reduce the number of games available. So, you'll only have a handful left after they do that. So, I wonder, is it actually going to happen, or is it just going to be, is it going to definitely happen? That's my thought.
What do you think, Sam?
I'm trying to look up how long Rosetta 1 stuck around
for. That's exactly what I was about to ask, if somebody knew.
Wasn't it one of the Snow Leopard updates that pulled it out?
Did Snow Leopard have it, or did it get pulled?
I think the first versions of Snow Leopard had it. But
there was Leopard 10.5 and then Snow Leopard 10.6.
Mm-hmm.
So
the 10.6 went up to 10.6.8, didn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like it went away in 10.6.3.
Tiger 10.4 was the first OS released with
2006. It was introduced.
Rosetta was not installed by default in Snow Leopard, but it was available.
Right.
And then 10.7 Lion, it was not supported in any way, not even as like an additional install, post OS install. So that's 3 OS versions, about 3 years.
Yeah, Lion was released 2011, mid 2011. So it was
so
4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So that's a fair...
Yeah, they weren't on a yearly cadence back then.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
funny to think about that.
A decent amount of time, and hopefully by that point we'll have a lot more native support.
Right.
But, I fondly remember using Rosetta back in the day. It wasn't great, but it let me do my stuff. So
Got the job
The
done.
word
including the
cheap
OS
shaper
9
appeared in my
boot
head.
screen that you would get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, let's presume 5 years of Rosetta 2 support. That does sound pretty good. There's always going to be straggler software on, kind of anywhere, particularly on the Mac, I think. And it just, just like lots of stuff didn't get updated to 64-bit because devs just don't have the time or resources, don't care or whatever. So, eventually, they'll probably be someone's favorite game. They love to play single player, multiplayer, I don't know what. And, 5 years from now, it's, won't be playable on a Mac. But theoretically, there'll be a lot more other games they could play. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like that example KOTOR, I really doubt that anyone's going to actually port that to, native, unless they port the iPhone version or the iPad version. But I don't think anyone's going to spend any money doing that. So it's a real shame because there's thousands of games that are going to be lost to.
Yeah, it isn't too bad because I would assume 99% of the work is done because it's on iOS. It's probably just a little bit of UI tweaks.
What I expected from the when I heard that the iPhone, iPad apps were going to be playable on the M1, I thought that, well, this is it. This means that a developer, publisher, they're going to step in and say, well, I've got this really good iPad app, really good popular iPad game. Let's just make it compatible for everything. We can make it compatible for the Apple TV, make it compatible for the Mac desktop. And we're going to see a flood of ports, like proper native ports. But that just hasn't materialized. There's only a handful of things which have been ported. Like, for example, a few months ago, it was Gwent, got a kind of Mac release, but it was just the iPhone ported over. There's so many games that, they click a couple of buttons and they'll basically have a full Mac port available. But nobody seems to care enough to make that switch. And all this work is done. The hard part is done. It's just making it scale to the correct aspect ratio, add a bit of keyboard, trackpad, mouse support, and you're done. But it hasn't materialized.
That's true, but I think an important factor is also the support aspect of it, because as soon as you support another platform, you need to have support staff available who can answer queries about that platform. So if someone wants to play the game on a Mac, they might consult the support department, say, this doesn't load, why doesn't it load? And now they have to have support staff who also know how to deal with Mac issues, not just iPhone, iPad issues.
I think
that's actually going to be a big blocker for a lot of intermediate companies, at least.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. I had not a funny story. Not really. It's just a story. I think it was Settlers 7, if I recall, and that was like 2010, 2011, something. I don't know. I believe I was reviewing it for Inside Mac Games. I was. So I had a key. I believe it was an Ubisoft title. And I had some really weird issues. I don't remember what it was on my iMac. It was, I don't know if it was like freezing or crashing. And I contacted support. And they had no idea what I was talking about. They had no idea what a Mac was, basically. They just gave me some, PC link instead. It's like, this doesn't help me, and that was a big company even, like Ubisoft. Yeah. Of course, back then they were supporting Mac a bit more, some Assassin's Creed and this and that and whatever. But that was a distinct memory in my head, what Casper was just saying. Like, the support, or you look at Feral or Aspire's website, and it's just filled with FAQs and how to, what if I run into this problem, or go here for support. And I mean, those are like more specialist porting houses, but I think the point remains, unless you can expect your game to basically run flawlessly, which it seems most stuff I'm not deep in Apple Arcade, but as far as I know, like everything, like they're well tested, pretty much bug free. As far as I know, they just work pretty much anywhere they're supposed to work. and there's probably not like a ton of support going on. That's my impression. I don't know how accurate
As
that
well
is.
as any software can work.
Right. Well, of course, no such thing as 100% flawless. Yeah. I've had really good luck in my computers in terms of mostly cooperating, and I used to do more gaming community stuff, more Mac gaming community stuff. We talked a bit about that on the last show, and so getting people into lots of different Mac games, and I would be running it just fine on my iMac. Someone had a different iMac, and they're like, it won't run, won't open, crashes, freezes, stutters, and I'm just like, well, it works on mine. I don't know why it won't work on yours. I mean, of course, assuming they meet the minimum requirements or the recommended requirements or whatever. That is tricky.
That whole requirements thing, when you had Macs of the past, you had Intel Macs with different discrete graphic card manufacturers, and you had a whole really big range. Now we only have two and a half types of Macs. We've got the M1. You can have either 8 gigabytes of RAM or 16 gigabytes of RAM, or 7 GPU cores or 8 GPU cores. They're all basically identical, right? So in theory, the support should be a lot easier because there's not really a difference between the iMac and a Mac Mini. So hopefully that'll make support easier. Give
That
more
is very
incentive.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost to me it reminds me of a console. Honestly, it's like it's just kind of this fixed hardware, more or less fixed hardware. And there's a very minor. Oh, I don't know if you hear some sirens in the background. It's not me.
They're coming for you.
Yeah, it's my shirt. It's a cat with a gun on it. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the hardware. Yeah, it's not like you have a completely different version of a graphics card. Or back when Macs actually had like NVIDIA GPUs, or even the ones that had both in them, the discrete and the dedicated ones, or whatever. So I do find that very interesting. And we did talk about like the bottom line hardware on another episode. Bringing up kind of the ease of use for developers and porters. So I think that's also a key aspect of what Andy just mentioned. So the unified hardware aspect, in a sense. Even moving forward, assuming it won't change, it'll just be more of the same stuff, just better. M2, M1X, whatever it is.
One big thing I've thought of in a rebuttal to my own point earlier, but one big unified system is publishers love money, obviously, and selling one version of your game that works on 2, maybe 3 platforms if you consider iPad and iOS different. They make less money doing that. They would love to sell you a Mac version and an iPhone version, or maybe even an iPad version. So hopefully there's universal games, but
they don't have to make a universal binary. They could sell different ones.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They'll probably do that, and that might hinder
just use the same code base, though.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's up. The developers have to decide whether the iOS or whatever the M1 version is playable on a desktop of some kind or laptop of some kind. It's not just automatic. They have to opt in, as far as I understand.
Well, they could have a universal, like works on everything, or they could have standalone, or they could just have iPhone if they don't feel like dealing with the Mac.
Right.
Or any combination thereof.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I don't currently have an iPad, though I did. Just a regular one. I didn't have an iPad Pro or anything. Though I can see why they're super popular tablets. They're great, but like certain games that I rather like XCOM or XCOM 2 or Darkest Dungeon, or I don't know, I think they even had some of the Telltale games back when they were Mac compatible. Haha. And they, again, same thing. They had their the Mac version, which is otherwise Steam Play, which is cool. And then there's the iPad version. You got to go and spend $10 or $20 to buy it again. It's like, well, I don't want to buy it again. I already bought the game. Oh, not in every. Sometimes it was a review code or whatever, but I'm more like I want crossplay, and they're adding that more now, like cross saves. I think we talked about that on Hades and maybe some other games previously from you guys. Kind of works everywhere, and this is a little bit of a pivot. No company's perfect, but I really like Epic's push for crossplay in the industry. I don't really see anyone else doing it in a big sort of public way like they are. And as far as I know, they've even released tools and infrastructure, backend tools like voice and multiplayer tools or something people can just use in their games, as far as I know, and supports crossplay, some kind of tool set. And we were talking about the future of gaming. And I wonder, Yeah, well, this is the problem, right? Like I would like this future where like all games just kind of work everywhere, more within reason. You know, there's obviously going to be some like mobile experiences or desktop experiences or VR experiences or something, but like what Sam was just saying, they love money, right? And they love to sell you different versions. So there's probably a lot of barriers to that ever even happening. But I see someone like Epic really wanting, if not cross support, at least cross play everywhere. But it'd be interesting if there was like this buy once, play on console, play on Mac, play on PC, play on phone, whatever. That would be interesting.
Your example of Epic is quite ironic, given that then the Fortnite is not on a Mac.
Yes, it is ironic. It's ironic now due to recent law. But I thought that lawsuit was concluded, but not like the results publicly disclosed, or it's supposed to be this month or something.
I don't know.
It's soon. It's soon. It's supposed to be soon.
Well, Fortnite's not on any Apple platform currently.
Yes, currently not. This is true. But the Epic Store, yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the first like week of that trial was some of the best Apple news in years, when all the court documents were public, and it was not just Apple, but like Sony looked horrible. Like it got revealed they were forcing developers to pay them extra money if they want to crossplay on the PS4 and stuff like that. Yeah. And like all of Apple's like emails with Tim were getting leaked, and like after a week they shut down that the public access to all those court docs. But
it was great. I agree. No, it's true. It's in Epic's push, basically, well, they just want more money. That's really all it comes down to. Because they want their own version of an app store, which they can get a cut of. Basically, that's what they want. So, do I begrudge it to them? No. Do I think their argument's a bit silly? More or less.
Steam's done a good job of cross-platform, like with PC and Linux, because they don't make you rebuy a game if it comes on their new platform. Our new platform is in desktop OS platforms.
Right. Andy, you were saying earlier Valve stuff isn't supported. I believe the only stuff that is Dota 2 and CSGO. Everything else is kaput as far as Mac goes.
Yes, that's right. Dota 2 and CSGO, which I feel like they run Source 2, don't they? So that's why they're still supported. Yeah. Yes. So it's quite interesting. So sorry, I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, that's
I have
all right.
a question for you, Andy.
Sure.
Fidelity FX, I know that's AMD's sort of DLSS competitor. I've heard people using it on Macs with Intel graphics because it's like cross-platform to help out with Dota 2 and CSGO on the Mac platform. Does that work on the M1? Do you know?
To be honest, I have not explored this topic much yet, so it's actually news to me if someone's got it to work on Dota 2 on macOS. So that's something I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, I heard guys talking about it, and that made so much more sense to me, because if you have like a 6800 XT or some high-end card, you probably don't care that much about Fidelity FX, but if you have an Intel HD 630 running Dota 2, that extra 10 frames might be the difference between 25 and 35 FPS.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it works on Intel, NVIDIA, and AMD, and works on every OS, I think, too. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
It should run in a regular fragment shader, so as long as everything else would be running fine, there isn't necessarily any reason it wouldn't be able to run. I think I'm not that deep into the tech of their new technology there, so I can't say for sure, but I don't think that there'd be any reason for it not to work.
I'm trying to look it up here.
I did see a little chatter about that from a few people I know, and I peeked at it. I think I don't know, I went and enabled something in Dota 2. I didn't notice a difference, but I have a high-end machine, and Dota 2 already runs at like ridiculous levels for me. So I do remember long ago trying to run it on a MacBook Air, and it was unplayable. It was just stuttered and lagged and like practically over melted the machine. That was like a 2013 MacBook Air, I think, a low-end one. So it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Okay, I just looked here. There's some video from 2 weeks ago. Some random guy Andre Legendaire, 70 subscribers. There's a shout out. It's an option on his M1 MacBook Air. You can just check
I'll
the box in
definitely,
Dota 2.
I'll definitely check that out. That's something that I'll definitely have a look at.
It'll only obviously on games that have implemented it, but
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Yeah, so sorry, coming back to the topic of crossplay. So it is interesting that Valve, basically Steam has so many kind of crossplay, games. I wonder how many Mac gamers, they buy a Mac for the first time. They had some PC games in the past, and their entire library is just the entire Mac OS library consists of PC games which happen to have a Mac OS port, and then. How do these porters get, these Aspires and Ferals? How do they get compensated for it? Because these gamers who play on the Mac after the fact, right? They're not really generating additional revenue for the publisher or the developer.
I have an answer for that because
Sure.
they've told me before when I used to work with them. The answer is most of the time they don't, because when you buy it, you have to install and play it on your Mac within 30 days, or they don't get any money. So unless you just happen to buy it a week before and suddenly you got a Mac or whatever. But yeah, that's that. So if if it's an older game or you don't have whatever it is, then the Mac guys are out of luck. They get nada. But there's there's different ways the Mac guys, like the Ferals and Aspires, do their business. They either A, get contracted to port something, in which case they're getting paid, or B, they're paying to license and port it, and of course hoping to sell copies and then get the money back. So
I see,
there's basically three different things going on there. Them getting paid, contracted, them paying for licensing. Licensing sometimes expires, which is why we see, if you remember a game like Mafia 2, license expired like 3 years later or something, and suddenly, poof, it was just gone. It's like the game's still there, but their license to sell it ran out, which is hilarious. Not really, but it is in a way. And yeah, or that. Yeah, they have to be installed. It has its way of detecting whatever you're on. And then the money, whatever that cut is, 70%, I guess, zips over. I do feel bad for these companies sometimes, like Feral Aspire, whoever. They release their Mac version, and then, like, the day they release it, there's some enormous sale on the game for, like, 50 to 75% off. It's like, it's supposed to kind of be the Mac launch, $50, $60 game, whatever. Some of them are cheaper, of course. And then, people are buying it for $10 or something. That's got to be painful. Like, imagine a PC launch, 50, 75% off. It's like nobody does that. I don't know, you do a third-party site, Greenman Gaming or something or whatever, you can get like 10 to 20% off max, usually through some pre-order program or something. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But that's the
It depends how long the Mac port has taken to produce, right? If it's 2 years later and then you get a Mac port, or then maybe deserves a sale to get it going.
Yes. No, to pivot to that idea a little bit, it depends on what kind of gamer you are, and we had an episode about that. But, like, do you always have to be playing the latest and greatest games, whether it's on Mac or PC or whatever, console or what have you, exclusives, so on, God of War and so on and so forth? Or are you happy to get stuff later? Because when you get things later, in many cases, they tend to be like Game of the Year style editions where all the DLCs bundled or expansions are bundled, or there's a bunch of patches and bug fixes. So I've rather enjoyed that in some cases. I didn't mind it coming later to the Mac, months, even years later, because you get this nice fancy bundle all in one. And I'm a bit of a completionist. If I like a game, I want to have all the stuff for it. So it's like, oh, here's just a nice, great bundle with everything all in one. And sometimes on a sale, even better, So that's an interesting bonus, which hasn't been so true lately. But I mean, I'm referring more to like the previous 8 or 10 years, not necessarily the last year or two. Yeah, I've liked that.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, but it's like a bonus where you get it involuntarily, right? If you could just get the game same day release from Mac and Windows, you could hold on until that Game of the Year edition came out anyway, right? So
it's true.
Really, the best version, the best deal for us would be to get the Mac version on day one.
No, for sure. Aspire used to be really good about that. Like Borderlands 2, I think, came out 2 weeks after the PC version or something. Pretty badass. And I think all the civs were maybe same day launch, or within a week or a few days or something. Aspire hasn't done anything lately. I hope they are. I believe that they seem to be making games now. Hopefully they'll actually make it on Mac. I think it would be like sacrilegious or whatever the word is if they released a new game and it was PC only. It'd be like, how could you? Oh, you've stabbed us.
Like Bungie back in the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so they've been publishing all kinds of things, PC stuff, Switch stuff, Android stuff, whatever. Yeah, if they make a game, and as like a former Mac studio, don't make any Mac support for it, that's just, traitors. I'm not condemning them because I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But they are making games. If you look at the job openings, it's level designer and AI, blah, blah, and all that stuff.
Well, it's cool that they're making it in charge of their own destiny, because if you're constantly working, depending on others, then you're just at their mercy, right?
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And it's something, I don't know if I've asked, because I've interviewed various members of Feral and Aspire before. Only once on the old show was Edwin Smith. Otherwise, just a bunch of text or email interviews or whatever they could post. I don't think it never occurred to me to ask them, like, you're in game development, but you're not a game developer. Like, does that bother you? Are you like really happy with your job to just port games? Would you rather be on that creative side, or are you actually involved in making them? Like, that's an interesting question. That I don't know the answer to these things.
I would assume for those, because there's porting houses on the console side and PC side too. I think they just attract a certain type of engineer or programmer or developer. Like, people know that they're not going to be designing the next, I don't know, God of War or something at Feral. But they'll probably attract more technical focused programmers that want to really optimize and like just let's get this running as efficiently as possible on this Mac platform. Because there's Bluepoint, I think Sony just bought them, and all they were doing is porting PS3 games to PS4 or 5. Recently, the big one was Demon's Souls, which is a big PS5 launch title. That was a PS3 game that Bluepoint ported.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
But I think also, even if the same developers got jobs in studios that make new titles, their work wouldn't necessarily be more creative, right? Because they just have a role where they would focus on the technical aspects anyway, right? If you're a programmer, you might, in some cases, have some tech or some say in the creative aspects as well, but you're still not going to be the artist or something, right? Because that's not the part of the project you're managing, right?
That makes sense.
John Carmack of the old
John Carmack, yeah.
Brilliant programmer.
Absolutely.
Probably the best designer, but really good programmer.
That makes sense, yeah. And you can see the pride in which Feral takes. By see, I mean like when you read their announcements or tweets or whatever. They definitely pride themselves on optimization, and they have done some pretty amazing stuff. So that makes sense that it attracts a certain kind of talent, like you said. Yeah, I can see that.
I also love about Feral that once I contacted their support about a glitch in Thief, where the graphics were looking messed up on my old iMac. So I wrote support, and it took some time, but eventually I got a super detailed response back from like lead programmer of Thief or something like that. I was like, here's the reason why it was bugging out, and we fixed it. And like, I got the technical details because I wrote in a technical language, and it was a programmer who responded to me. I love that kind of engineer engagement.
That's cool.
Very nice. Yeah, cool stuff. In your opinion, Andy, because I don't think you necessarily chimed in, what's your what do you think the future of Mac gaming is? Whether theoretically or even the future you'd like to see, whatever it is, whatever angle you'd like to take. I'd just like to hear your comments on that.
So the way that I see it now is that Apple are focused on only really one aspect of game content, which is Apple Arcade, which we already discussed. And this is a kind of like casual stroke AA kind of style budget gaming That's obviously has to fit a lowest common denominator, which is basically the smartphone, and it has to be compatible with everything else in the Apple ecosystem. But and so they're not really there to support kind of what we'd call AAA PC gaming, and what I think is that there's going to be no like direct funding or support, but what they've accidentally done is created a really good ARM chip, which happens to run some AAA games really well. So there's several that do quite well. For example, Metro Exodus, Baldur's Gate 3. These games they run fantastically on the M1 chip, and if Apple continued to iterate and create better chips in the future, then there's going to be a smallish community of people who want to play GTA 5 on their M2 Mac or M3 Mac in the future, and that's going to continue working if people are trying hard enough and diligent enough to get that to work. And but in terms of official support, I don't think much is going to happen. It's not Apple's philosophy to bring a GTA style game to the Mac or to the smartphone. They own a kind of they're just interested in amplifying their ecosystem as much as possible, making as much money from other people as possible. And we're kind of stuck in this idea that the M1, the future of Macs, can game. It's just a case of publishers putting things out there on Steam or distributing it DRM free, and they kind of have to take a chance really, because they've got to publish things through storefronts or through their own websites or through the Mac App Store. And the market for it is relatively small, but it's a kind of enthusiast market, I'd say, which enjoys tinkering and getting things to work. And I don't really see much. I mean, what I like to see is more developers publishing their mobile iPad games, and thinking that we're going to reach these millions and millions of people with all these Apple devices, and one of the ways to play it will be on a Mac. I'd love to see more of that. I mean, one game that I cover quite a lot is like an extremely popular free-to-play game called Genshin Impact, and it has a Mac port, it has an iOS port, iPhone port, iPad port, and people are constantly trying to figure out how to get that to work on the M1 Mac. There's loads and loads of different workarounds that you can get to make it work. But like I said earlier in the podcast, the developers just haven't taken the time to figure it out yet, or to turn that switch on, which will give it a full Mac port. And I think that's a real shame, because the chips are capable of it. They're very powerful. They've got great battery life, and it's just down to. I think what it's ultimately down to is like relatively small audience numbers. The market for Mac gaming anyway. I mean, Apple gaming itself is huge, but Mac gaming is, out of the big pie of Apple gaming, is tiny, right? And I think that's a real shame, because there's so much potential. There's like we said earlier, there's one hardware to target, one piece of hardware to target, one chip, right? So the hard work is done. It's just a case of developers, publishers getting on board and porting their software, which is already on iPhone, iPad anyway, and then putting it on the Mac too. So what I'd like to see is more of that, and I think there could be like a snowball effect where the more developers do it, then the more other publishers will see that there's this kind of this piece of pie which is unclaimed, right? But
claim the pie, guys. Come on.
There's a lot of people here.
Delicious.
There's a lot of gamers who would be who'd be very happy to see proper ports of AAA games. And,
One, it's more of an interesting anecdote than anything, but I find it interesting is, so like Xbox Game Pass, that's 2017 that came out. Very much like a new, what would you say, way to not play games, but own games in quotation marks. Arcade came out in 2019, I believe. So they are pretty early on that new model of gaming that seems to be here to stay. Game Pass is super awesome. I have an Xbox and it's just great. Like it's like Netflix. Like it's a no brainer. Or like Apple Music, all you can eat music or Spotify, stuff like that. So it seems like the no brainer. I'm guessing in the next 5-10 years, people will migrate much more heavily to that. Same as TV and same as music. So Apple was early on that. So hopefully that means something. I don't know if it does, but I'm hoping it does. And then what I also find interesting is Google's Stadia. They had not a ton of games, but they had quite a few like big games, like Destiny 2, Cyberpunk, Doom Eternal. I'm just looking through a list right now. And they pretty much got all those, I don't think because developers wanted to be on Stadia. Like Stadia wasn't totally unproven platform. I don't think devs were clamoring to get on Stadia. Google just paid money, I would assume, and got a lot of games. I don't know how much they paid, probably a lot, but Apple could very easily do something similar to that, where they're just going to splash some of their 300 billion or whatever they have around, and they could easily be getting Apple Arcade like AAA games if they want to. Who knows if they want to? Probably not. Yeah. I'm just sort of dreaming right now, but
right. Go ahead, Casper.
I was just going to say that Sam brings up something interesting as well, because the model of game acquisition with Game Pass and similar, that takes me back to what you said earlier about a deterrent for publishers to make cross-platform play available for free. If you buy it once, you can play it anywhere. Because if you have a model like Game Pass, well, they've made their money. You know, they don't need to sell you the copy twice because it's sort of a subscription thing anyway. So that's incentivizes that kind of cross-platform game availability thing way more.
That is a very interesting point. And we can see this even outside of gaming and just regular software. There's a big switch to subscription models over just selling it to you once. And you see that everywhere, whether it's even crossover or, I don't know, I use a Clean My Mac X or whatever app and whatever Adobe software. Everyone's like switching to subscription models because, well, purportedly it makes people, the companies more money. So that is an interesting angle. You know, will there be... Which way will it go, or which way will what company, say Apple in this case, go? Apple Arcade's seemingly here to stay. They just, I think, hit over 200 games just the other week or two. So what my thought is related to this conversation, this idea of like basically more games on the Mac, is because they put the M1 chip in an iPad. So, and then suddenly that iPad can run Divinity Original Sin 2, or I don't know what other like big game was maybe there. So if they keep putting the newer silicon chips in iPads or iPad Pros or whatever it is, and then there's actually a much wider selection of games available on an iPad, but they're just not these AAA games we're used to playing, with few exceptions, like Divinity Original Sin. I consider it a AAA game. Maybe it's a AA game to some people, but it's an enormous game that took years to produce and everything by a big studio, Larian. So to me, that's interesting. Will there be this thing where they because the iPad's such a big market, it is, as far as I understand, the biggest tablet market share, I think. Yep. So
yeah, that's correct.
If more and more people keep, I don't know, but what percentage is iPad Pro? Probably less because they're very expensive. But if they keep, like if that bottom line keeps being like a new a silicon chip and it's all the same or very similar to the desktops, could they do something with that? But then it would have to be, it's already true. These games aren't Apple Arcade games, but as far as I know, they have minimum requirements of an iPad, which is funny. But like to play this game, I think they need like an iPad Pro to say play Divinity Original Sin 2. I think it needs an iPad Pro. I could be wrong because I'm not a iPad gamer.
Yes.
So will there be more? Yeah. So will there be more? I don't know. Will they make a Witcher 3 or Doom Eternal for an iPad Pro? I don't know. But could they? Probably. So to me, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Sort of bottom line ecosystem idea is what I was kind of going for.
Yeah, I think it just seems like Larian is the exception here. It's just that this is the one company devoted to this idea of iPad and Mac desktop, gaming, and there's no other company following suit. It used to be Blizzard. He used to make Mac ports for everything, but to drop the ball on Overwatch and Diablo 2 Resurrected. No one else is following suit, but it'd be very exciting to see something like, I don't know, World of Warcraft running on an iPad, because that could technically work quite easily because they've got the native M1 port. It's just haven't bothered to.
No, it's true. I also think the other European studio I want to shout out is, I think they're maybe the Russian 4A Games, who does the Metro series. I forget their exact origin. Sorry, but they've ported all their games to Mac. It took a while, but the Metro series has all been on Mac.
Yeah, the Metro Exodus is still an Intel application, so it runs through Rosetta 2. So it would require a lot more work to get that to work correctly on like another like an iPhone, for example. Obviously, we wouldn't want to play it on an iPhone, but yeah, you're right. You're right. It could be ported to the M1 iPad Pro quite easily if you wanted to.
Yeah. The last thought I had on this is, and this is only based off those comments Apple made. We talked about in a previous show about how they said, we have some engineers who are gamers and we kind of want to do something or try and compete with some high-end PC cards. They made some. I'm paraphrasing. They said something like that. So I'm thinking. Probably not this year, but maybe, or let's say sometime in 2022, will they have a keynote where they kind of make a splash? Like, hey, here's our M2 or M3 chip, our 32 or 64 core machine. Here's what it can do. Will they demo stuff like the way they used to at some of these Macworld events or WWC events or whatever event it was? Like Steve Jobs famously demoing Halo, way back in the day. Like, will Apple try and show off their new hardware in a gaming capacity, in a AAA gaming capacity, not here's the latest Apple Arcade game. It's like, yeah, the iPhone can run that. We don't care. What can this 32 core machine do? So if they, they make a public effort in a big way, because those events get a lot of attention and their hardware releases get a lot of attention in general, in the tech community in general. So I feel like that would basically help advertise kind of a thing. Will that incentivize anything? I would hope it would, but will they do it at all in the first place? I don't know. I'm just hoping they do, basically.
There's been some on-off rumors coming up every now and then about a box similar to an Apple TV, but sort of the replacement to the Pippin. That's an old reference, an Apple gaming console, essentially, with an Apple Silicon chip as a Apple TV-like box that ships with a game controller instead of the classic Apple TV remote. Essentially just an MFI gamepad. MFI made for iPhone. That's the little label they use for gamepads that Apple have said, hey, that's for iPhone. So if they were to... I don't actually think they're going to do that, but there have been rumors for it. But if they're going to do a device like that, I think that the primary way to show it off at the event would be content for it rather than just showing off the hardware itself, because for something like that, content is king, right?
For sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Basically have to wait and see, but all the rumors or pundits say the M1X or M2 should be coming this fall, roughly, supposedly, unless there's some delay. So that should be exciting for all of us and for Andy, who can talk all about it on his wiki and his YouTube channel, and we can talk about it on the show. I'm very hyped for the next. I'm actually waiting to buy a laptop. I sold my other one to my brother. It's just a random side story, but I vaguely need one right now for some occasional weekend travel, but I don't want to buy one. I want to wait, and I don't want to buy one, then wait, sell, and buy another. So I'm just waiting until the new ones come out. Pretty interested to see what they can do. Considering the M1 has far exceeded my expectations and still continues to surprise me, as I said. I'm really hoping a presumable 16 core, or at least 12 core. If it's 12 core, I'll be disappointed. I hope it's 16. Like a double, presumably, but will it be double the performance? I don't know. But if it is, that's like that's pretty hefty. That'll be interesting.
The scaling is almost never entirely linear for that sort of thing, but with GPUs, it's very close to linear.
Right. That makes sense. Yep. So we'll have to see. Whatever the future of Mac gaming is, it'll be around in one form or the other, or many forms, as it currently seems to exist. Native, non-native, emulated, non-emulated, here and there, hither and yon. But the games go on, and how supported it'll be remains to be seen from Apple or other companies. And our future of Ferals and Aspires is a little hazy as well. But it's all very interesting, and there'll always be something interesting or exciting to talk about in the Mac gaming space, and that's why we're here. So, anything else you want to discuss, Andy, or anything comes to mind?
Not at the moment, no. But, yeah, there's always like, I feel like for me, what I'm excited about is just the raw power of that chip, because that will, whatever comes next, will represent the baseline of an entire generation of Mac desktop computers that millions of people will use, and each additional piece of power is going to represent some way to brute force some game to work better. So whether it's a native game or a non-native game, I mean, especially with non-native games, especially running things through virtual machine where the resources are very constrained. So, if you run Windows through Parallels, you're only using half the cores, half the RAM, right? But if we've got triple the amount of cores to work with, then suddenly it opens up the possibilities of that gaming space quite a lot. So that's why I'm excited about the next generation.
Nice.
Something on my mind is when you start out with a game that doesn't run natively on the platform, doesn't have a native macOS version at all. Maybe it has a Rosetta one that doesn't actually launch or something. What kind of steps, what's the process for you for trying to tinker with it and see if you can make it work? Where do you sort of start and proceed from there on?
Well, I mean, to be honest, right, I'm personally, on my technical skill level is, I would say, relatively low compared to the community members, for example, in PC Gaming Wiki, who we have programmers, we have engineers, we have people who understand like graphics rendering pipelines, right? I don't really understand this. For me, it's all about quality of life issues, right, with games. That's why I started the wiki in the first place. I wanted to find out, where the save game goes, right? Because it's different in every game. And, for me, it's just about linking up resources. So a Windows game has pockets of communities that exist kind of everywhere. So you have the WineHQ forum, you've got ProtonDB, you've got the whole Linux gaming community too. So these communities have these experts in them. They've posted up a forum post somewhere, and or they've shared some information on a Discord. And it's just a case of bringing that to the average user, right? So what I enjoy when I enjoy tinkering, I like to find kind of mining these communities and these resources, these experts, right, and then bringing them to people. So it's a case of like Googling very hard and testing things out. I'm lucky because I've run a large gaming website to have a gigantic access to lots and lots of games. For example, I have a deal with Games Planet. They give us hundreds of pounds of keys a month, and then they will have a deal with GOG. They give us basically every game that they have, and it just lets me test everything out. And it's interesting that all of these forums and places, it's just a locus for all of these communities to come together. So the way I see it is I'm just linking up regular Mac users with kind of the research and testing that other people have done, and putting it in a format that's fairly easy for most people to digest.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Cheers.
Do you want to mention your YouTube channel and websites again, just for anybody listening?
Yeah. So PC Gaming Wiki is the main website, pcgamingwiki.com. Is there anything you want to know about it? Asking.
No, I've used it. I love the site. But
Yeah, so it's a popular website. I think we're drawing in 1.5 million page views a month, so it's decent size, very large community now. Apple Gaming Wiki is something I started relatively recently. It's doing, let me think, about 70,000 page views a month. Something that's a lot smaller, but just starting out. And YouTube channel is doing quite well, so I've been tinkering with that a lot, and I think I've reached over 11,000 subscribers now. So it's been
11.6, I think.
11.6. Yeah.
And what's the name of your channel, just for anybody?
The name is Andrew Tsai, or you can find it if you search the username Andy Tizer. So I'm there.
Sounds good.
Lovely. Yeah, there'll be links in the podcast descriptions to your stuff as well. But people also like to hear, so thank you, Sam, for
thank you very much.
Asking him to self-promote himself. Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. I think we covered some very interesting things. Circled back a few times to the same thing in a different light. But it was a lovely chat.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. If you want to pop on in the future, just send a ping or a tweet or whatever.
Sure.
Maybe around a new hardware launch or something.
That sounds fun.
Reconvene or whatever. Something juicy to sink our teeth into.
Mm-hmm.
Casper, Sam, anything? Any last words? That sounded ominous.
We're all gonna die.
No, it was great having you, Andy, and great podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gents. Good evening, and thanks for staying up late to Andy. Andy and Casper. Appreciate it, and we will see everyone next time. Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
A big thank you to Kevin McLeod for the intro and outro music. Be sure to check out his library on the web. You can find more episodes of our show on our website, macgamecast.com, or in all major podcast directories. If you enjoy the show, please consider commenting, following, or sharing. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.